My life was never the same after that night. I'm Lucas, 16 years old, and before all this, I was just an ordinary boy from Brooksville. My routine was simple: school, friends, and of course, my twin sister, Lara. We shared practically everything. Lara was my best friend and confidant. We always went out together to parties, football games, or just to walk Max, our faithful German shepherd who had been with me since I was a child. The tragedy occurred 6 months ago. I still remember it as if it were yesterday. We were returning from a birthday party, Lara and I, in our parents' car. That night, I was driving. We had just gotten our driver's licenses, and I was excited about the freedom it brought. Although I had drunk a little at the party, I felt well enough to drive, even though I knew I was doing something wrong. This is a secret I've always kept from everyone, carrying even more guilt in my heart. While we were talking and laughing, an animal suddenly appeared on the road. I tried to swerve, but the car went out of control and rolled over several times. When it finally stopped, I realized Lara was not by my side. Desperate, I got out of the car, feeling pain and confusion, and found her lying on the road. She was not wearing her seatbelt and had been thrown out of the vehicle. I knelt beside her, my heart racing. Lara was still alive, but unconscious. I held her hand, begging her to wake up, but when the paramedics arrived, she was already dead. The feeling of panic and helplessness took over me. My parents were devastated, but they never knew the whole truth. To everyone, it was an accident. To me, it was a never-ending nightmare. The days that followed were a blur of pain and guilt. Every time I closed my eyes, I relived that moment. Our parents tried to console me, saying it wasn't my fault, but I couldn't believe it. The weight of guilt and the secret suffocated me. Max seemed to be the only one who understood the depth of my pain, constantly staying by my side. And it was in this scenario of mourning and guilt that the first signs that something was very wrong began to appear. At Lara's funeral, the house was full of family and friends offering their condolences. Everyone tried to console me, saying it wasn't my fault, that it was a tragic accident. But I couldn't look anyone in the eye without feeling a pang of guilt piercing my heart. I remembered every laugh, every moment we shared, and the void left by her absence was unbearable. During the service, I felt a knot in my throat that seemed never to disappear. The words of comfort from the people around me sounded distant, as if they came from another world. I was trapped in a fog of pain and regret. The looks of compassion only increased my sense of isolation, as if no one could really understand what I was going through. The guilt gnawed at me inside, a constant weight that seemed impossible to bear. Max was by my side the whole time, as if he knew I needed his presence more than ever. His gaze seemed to understand the depth of my grief in a way no one else could. After the incident, my life changed drastically. I stopped going to school, unable to face my classmates and teachers. I spent almost all my time indoors, avoiding the outside world. The days dragged on, and Max's constant presence was my only source of comfort. About a month after Lara's funeral, I started to notice the first signs that something was wrong. It was night, and the house was immersed in an unsettling silence. I heard inexplicable noises, like light footsteps echoing down the hallway, but when I checked, there was no one there. Shadows moved in the corners of my vision disappearing when I tried to focus on them. Initially, I thought it was my mind playing tricks on me due to stress and guilt. Then, the nightmares began. At first, they were sporadic, but always vivid and disturbing. In one of the first, I was back in the car on the night of the accident. I could hear the sound of metal twisting, Lara's screams, and the overwhelming fear. Suddenly, I was out of the car, looking at Lara's body on the road. But instead of being unconscious, she stared at me. Her eyes, full of pain and accusation, pierced me. "Why did you let me die?" she whispered, her voice echoing in my mind. I woke up in a cold sweat, my heart racing, unable to go back to sleep. The feeling of being watched also intensified. During the day, I felt as if someone was watching me, but when I turned around, I saw nothing. At night, this feeling was even stronger. Max, who used to sleep peacefully by my side, now became restless, growling softly at the dark corners of the room. His reactions increased my anxiety, reinforcing the feeling that I was not alone. The nightmares became more frequent and terrifying. In another dream, I was in an open field with Lara by my side. Suddenly, she started to drift away, her body floating and disappearing into the darkness. I ran after her, shouting her name, but my feet seemed stuck to the ground. Lara turned, her expression of sadness and anger, and her words tore at me. "You abandoned me, Lucas. Now it's your turn." I woke up screaming, her face etched in my mind. These subtle events and constant nightmares began to erode my sanity. I felt on the verge of collapse, unable to distinguish between reality and illusion. The shadows and inexplicable noises became part of my daily life, and Lara's presence in my dreams was a constant reminder of the guilt I carried. The nightmares began to intensify, becoming increasingly vivid and terrifying. On one particularly dark night, I was thrown into a nightmare so real I could almost smell gasoline and feel the pressure on my chest. I was back that night, but this time, everything seemed distorted. The car was shrouded in thick fog, and I could hear the sound of metal twisting and Lara's screams echoing around me. Inside the car, Lara offered me more drink. I was holding a vodka bottle, drinking while driving. The feeling of guilt was overwhelming. "Drink more, Lucas," she said, with a cruel smile. "You always wanted this freedom, didn't you?" Suddenly, I was in the middle of a cemetery. The tombstones stretched endlessly under a starless black sky. Lara was there, standing beside her own tombstone, her face twisted with pain and anger. "Why did you leave me, Lucas?" she screamed, her words cutting through the silence like a knife. "You should be here with me." On another night, the nightmare began with a sensation of endless falling. I was falling, plunged into darkness, until I suddenly found myself in a forest. Lara appeared among the trees, her hands covered in blood, her eyes fixed on me. "Come with me, Lucas," she whispered, her voice hissing and full of venom. "You don't deserve to live." Lara's aggression increased with each dream. In one, I was trapped inside the car again. But this time, Lara was in the passenger seat, looking at me with an expression of pure anger. "You will feel what I felt," she screamed, as the car seemed to shrink around us. "Feel the weight of guilt." These nightmares left me exhausted, afraid to close my eyes. When I woke up, it felt like I had lived those moments for real. My body was tired, sweaty, and with mild pains, as if I had actually run or fought. Max also seemed to be affected. He growled and barked at empty corners of the house, as if he could see something I couldn't. His aggression was more intense in my room and the garage, where the accident car was still parked. One night, I was awakened by Max growling fiercely at my bedroom door. The atmosphere was heavy, and I could feel a strange chill in the air. Lara was there, an ethereal figure, but terrifyingly real. "You won't escape me, Lucas," she said, slowly advancing. "Let's end this together." I woke up screaming, in a cold sweat. Max was by my side, his fur bristling, growling at the empty space where Lara had been. The nightmares were unbearable, and Lara's aggression only increased my sense of despair. The line between dream and reality was becoming increasingly blurred, and I didn't know how much longer I could endure. The nightmares continued to torment me, but now things were getting worse. I started waking up in different places without remembering how I got there. My parents noticed something was wrong, and so did I. One night, I woke up in the yard, my bare feet on the damp grass. Another time, I woke up in the garage, near the car where everything happened. It was as if something or someone was guiding me during sleep, and I knew exactly who it was. Lara was guiding me, trying to lead me into dangerous situations. Every time I closed my eyes, she was there, her face twisted with anger and pain. In one of my sleepwalking episodes, I found myself standing at the edge of the stairs, about to take a step into the void. Max was beside me, growling and tugging at my clothes with his teeth. His intervention woke me up, and I stumbled, falling to my knees, feeling my heart racing with fear. The sleepwalking episodes continued, each more sinister than the last. One night, I woke up to Max barking fiercely. I was in the kitchen, holding a knife, not knowing how or why I was there. Max stood in front of me, his eyes fixed on mine, as if he knew he needed to protect me from something. He kept barking until I fully regained consciousness and dropped the knife, trembling. The scariest episode happened one night when I woke up on the second floor of the house, at my bedroom window, about to jump. In my mind, I saw a pool below me, with Lara calling me to dive in. "Come, Lucas. The water is great," she said, with a hypnotic voice. Max was beside me, barking desperately and pulling my pants with force. I woke up with a start, realizing that, in reality, I was about to fall onto the hard concrete. Panic took hold of me as I realized how close I had come to death. Lara seemed to be looking for different ways to kill me. Each sleepwalking episode was a new attempt to take me with her. My parents began to notice my strange behavior. I was paler, with deep dark circles, and my body was covered in small scratches and bruises that I couldn't remember how I got. They tried to talk to me, but I couldn't explain what was happening without sounding crazy. So, I continued to keep the secret, carrying the burden alone. Max continued to be my constant guardian. He seemed to always be alert, as if he knew when I was about to enter a new sleepwalking episode. His presence saved me countless times, and I knew that without him, I would have already succumbed to Lara's plans. These episodes were destroying me. I felt weaker and weaker, as if Lara was slowly draining my life. It was clear that she would not stop until she got what she wanted. And each night, the line between the world of the living and the dead became thinner, threatening to engulf me completely. The lack of sleep was destroying me. Every time I closed my eyes, Lara appeared, trying to take me with her. The fear of sleeping took over me, and I started taking pills to stay awake, filling myself with caffeine and stimulants. The constant exhaustion was consuming me, and paranoia began to set in. As the days passed, I began to see Lara during the day, in broad daylight. Sometimes she appeared in the hallway, looking at me with a sad smile, as if she wanted to console me. "I miss you, Lucas," she whispered, her voice soft as a whisper of wind. At other times, her face twisted in anger, and she blamed me for her death. "You killed me, Lucas. Because of you, I'm trapped here," she screamed, making my heart race with fear. Max was also increasingly restless. He followed me around the house, growling at empty spaces and barking at nothing. His constant presence reminded me that something was terribly wrong. I knew he was trying to protect me, but even his loyalty couldn't drive away the darkness that was consuming me. The hallucinations became more and more frequent. I saw Lara in every corner of the house, sometimes friendly, other times furious. The stress and lack of sleep were pushing me to the limit. Lara's words echoed in my mind, alternating between statements of longing and hate-filled accusations. I could no longer distinguish between what was real and what was the product of my exhausted mind. Finally, my body couldn't take it anymore. One afternoon, while sitting on the couch, struggling against fatigue, my eyes involuntarily closed. Max was by my side, watching me closely. I couldn't resist, and sleep overcame me. I fell into a deep and heavy sleep, diving once again into the nightmare that my life had become. In that sleep, Lara was there, waiting for me. This time, she seemed more real than ever. "Finally, you came back to me, Lucas," she said, extending her hand. "Now we can be together forever." The feeling of dread was overwhelming, and I knew I was closer than ever to being consumed by her vengeance. Exhaustion finally won, and I fell into a deep sleep, plunging back into the nightmare that my life had become. The environment around me began to change, the walls of my room disappearing and being replaced by a dark, winding road. I was driving the same car from the accident, my hands firmly on the wheel. The engine hummed softly, and the road was deserted, illuminated only by the car's headlights and the full moon in the sky. The air was heavy and humid, the night shrouded in an unsettling silence. The sense of déjà vu was overwhelming, as if I was reliving a familiar nightmare. The car's dashboard glowed, and everything seemed strangely calm, almost peaceful. The trees passed quickly by the windows, their shadows lengthening and twisting, creating sinister shapes. I drove automatically, as if my movements were guided by an invisible force. The road seemed endless, each curve leading to more darkness. The silence was disturbing, broken only by the sound of the engine and the occasional hum of the tires on the asphalt. Time seemed to stretch, each second dragging on, until suddenly I saw her. Lara was in the middle of the road, illuminated by the car's headlights. Her ghostly figure seemed to float, her face pale and her eyes glowing with an unsettling light. Time seemed to stop as I tried to process what I was seeing. Instinctively, I turned the wheel sharply to swerve, but the turn was too tight. The car skidded, the tires screeching in protest. I felt a strong impact, and everything went white for a moment. The sensation of falling was nauseating, as if I was being pulled into a bottomless abyss. My mind spun, trying to understand what was happening. When my vision returned, I realized I was falling. I woke up inside the same car that caused the accident, my body tense and sweaty. The first thing I noticed was the sensation of movement. The car was plummeting, and the world outside spun uncontrollably. I looked to the side and saw Lara sitting next to me, a happy smile on her face. "Finally, we will be together again," she said, her voice soft and full of satisfaction. Panic took hold of me, and I began to scream, struggling to understand the reality around me. I tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. The seatbelt was stuck, keeping me immobilized as the car fell. Lara continued to smile, her eyes fixed on me with a mixture of tenderness and madness. "You can't escape, Lucas. Finally, we will have the same fate and be at peace." The sensation of falling was overwhelming. The wind howled around the car, and gravity seemed to pull every cell of my body downward. Terror immobilized me, and my heart beat uncontrollably. I tried to call out for Max, but there was no sign of him. Lara laughed softly at my despair. "He can't save you this time," she whispered, leaning closer. "You and I, together, as it always should have been." The memories of that fateful night resurfaced. The sound of metal twisting, Lara's scream, the feeling of helplessness. It all hit me with full force. Every turn of the road, every decision that led me there, seemed to repeat in an endless loop. I looked desperately out of the car, trying to find a way to escape. The trees and rocks passed quickly, blurs of darkness against the night sky. The cliff was getting closer, and I could see the end coming. "Lara, please," I begged, tears streaming down my face. "I'm so sorry. I miss you so much." She touched my face gently, her touch cold as ice. "I know, Lucas. I know you miss me. But now, it doesn't matter anymore. We will be together, in peace, as it always should have been." The car continued to plummet, and I could see the ground approaching rapidly. The impact was inevitable. I closed my eyes, waiting for the end, as the sensation of falling intensified. The sound of metal meeting rock was deafening. Everything went white again, and then silence. The sensation of falling ceased, replaced by a final, icy peace. Lara was beside me, holding my hand, a serene smile on her face. Finally, we were together again, as she always wanted.